It can assume the physical nature of human thought. Who wouldn't want that? Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. Once again, coming your way with another one of my famed movie / Blu-ray reviews. Earlier this year, I don't know if it was spring, it might have been springish, early summer, something like that. This just manifested out of the blue. As you guys may or may not know, I frequent Blu-ray.com several times every day to keep up on the latest movie-related stuff. And just out of the blue, this Blu-ray was on there in some capacity. Maybe it was a little news article, I don't remember. But this is one of the early full moon movies, and if I might be correct in saying that it might be the second full moon movie after the successful Puppet Master in 1990. This was on my wish list for one of my top wanted to see on Blu-ray full moon movies. And the next one, I mean the one that I actually wanted on Blu-ray more than this, of course, is Crash and Burn, which, fingers crossed, I hope it's next. I'm not flipping you off, I'm crossing my fingers. But I was so excited when I saw that this was coming out on Blu-ray. And what's been happening with full moon Blu-rays recently, I don't know if they probably got some partnership with Amazon, but they come out like on Amazon before there's any word whatsoever on their full moon official website. I did end up getting the Shadowzone Blu-ray, and if I can briefly spoil my Blu-ray review, I did a post on it on my channel, on my community tab or whatever the hell you call it, and I was like, wow. The image quality on this release is absolutely very lucky, absolutely amazing. And if you're a fan of, if you've experienced a lot of full moon Blu-rays, you may or may not know that the quality, video and or audio quality, can be hit and miss, but definitely a hit with the Blu-ray of what's kind of like, I kind of don't like how they put it on here, like it's part of the title, but Shadowzone Remastered. It's a hit. If I can briefly spoil the Blu-ray review portion of this review. But anyway, my history with Shadowzone goes all the way back to like early 1990 when Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, was brand new on home video, on VHS and Laserdisc. Of course, I didn't have Laserdisc player at the time, but I did have a VCR, so obviously when Friday the 13th Part 8 was new on VHS, I rented it and I may have recorded it. But I'm pretty sure that the first VHS release of Friday the 13th Part 8 had a Shadowzone, a trailer for the full moon movie Shadowzone before the movie. And if you guys may or may not know that in the early 90s, I don't know when it ended, if it was 94 or 95-ish, but for the first several years of the early 90s, Full Moon actually was distributed, Charles Band's Full Moon Pictures. Its titles were distributed by Paramount Home Video on VHS, which was just, oh my God. What an amazing, partnership for a while there, which also meant that trailers for full moon movies would appear on non-full moon Paramount titles. For example, as I said, the trailer for Shadowzone was probably on the VHS for Friday the 13th Part 8. So you could have full moon trailers on non-full moon Paramount VHS releases. What an amazing way to get your movies marketed and advertised, by being on all these full moon, these other non-full moon Paramount VHS releases. So I knew about Shadowzone for the longest time, but interestingly, I don't think I ever saw it until like 12 years later, when I actually came across the VHS used at a store for a relatively decent price. I think it was $2, like $1.99, and I'm like, wow, I've known about Shadowzone for the last 12 years. I'm familiar with the trailer, so I bought it. And I watched it, I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. I mean, in my opinion, early full moon is kind of fun. Admittedly, there's a lot of what I call the classic, just, time filler, full moon, looking around in the shadows, in the darkness with the flashlight and stuff, demonic toys, even Crash and Burn. This movie, certainly a lot of full moon movies have just time filler stuff. Admittedly, it's full of all that, but I also think that there's a really kind of a cool, just low budget, the atmosphere, just very much with like Crash and Burn. I really like the atmosphere on this movie. And incidentally, it is written and directed by the guy who made The Slayer in the early 80s, which luckily, I think it was 2015, got an Arrow Video Blu-ray release, and I was so excited when that happened, and I reviewed that movie and that Blu-ray. Feel free to check it out. But the guy who made The Slayer wrote and directed this, and his wife, I'm pretty sure it was his wife, the kind of the hot blonde in The Slayer, Carol Cottonbrook, also produced this, Shadowzone. So Crash and Burn was written by this guy who wrote and directed Shadowzone. I don't know if he was slated to be director and that fell through, so Charles Band directed Crash and Burn. But it's interesting how, you know, Shadowzone and Crash and Burn, you know, a couple of early 90s full moon movies have the same kind of, you know, atmosphere, underground, or just, you know, whatever kind of thing or whatever. But incidentally, I do think both of the scripts for Shadowzone that he wrote for Shadowzone and Crash and Burn are relatively strong. And I'm a big fan of Shadowzone and Crash and Burn. And fingers crossed, man, that Crash and Burn is next or sometime coming out on Blu-ray, and if it can look as good as this, oh, that'll be amazing. But anyway, if you don't know what Shadowzone it's about, it's just such a, you know, it's not an amazing movie by any stretch. You can watch it on Tubi, TV.com, not the HD version, unfortunately. I think it's the original film to tape transfer, but still, you can get an idea. You can see the movie and get an idea what it's like. But I just love his, like, low-key, low-budget, early 90s vibe to this movie. And well, one thing you gotta hand it to, like, early full moon movies is they really, even if they're low budget, like the cinematography is really, really pretty good in this movie, and it just shines like just crazy on the Blu-ray release. But the cinematography even looked good on the first, you know, film to tape transfer. But, you know, say what you will about the movies, like the frickin' cinematography is really great. So the story of this movie is like this Captain Hickok, I don't know if he's whatever the hell he is, a military guy, and his, you know, Michael Myers or whatever, Roy from, you know, New Beginning or whatever, like coveralls, overalls, you know, single piece thing, shows up at this Project Shadowzone somewhere, the Jackass Flats, I want to say, whatever that means. But this closed off former military underground installation, I don't know what, built in the 50s or the 60s or whatever during the Cold War, but where this Project Shadowzone, this scientific experiment is going on. Basically the reason he's visiting, and he arrived by helicopter. They must have knew someone who had a helicopter or helicopter business, but they, you know, this is some serious uberage, man. He's getting flown in by a little mini helicopter, and the helicopter takes off. A little bit of really cool production value in that situation. But the reason he's visiting is because there was a fatality. Some guy died on Project Shadowzone during this scientific whatever the hell they claim to be doing, you know, experimentation, whatever. Some guy died. Hickok, does he have a first name? I don't think so. Hickok arrives, and incidentally, you know, I'm a heterosexual straight, you know, male. I like women exclusively, but there's something about like the guys that Full Moon was casting in the early 90s. Like, this guy is kind of, I mean, he's not all muscular or whatever, but he's got a really kind of a cool, like, just macho man, you know, whatever, man's man kind of just face, like, you know. And same thing with like the guy in Crash and Burn, like the guy, the lead men that they were casting in some of their early Full Moon movies really had this kind of cool, you know, old-fashioned, whatever, just maleness about him or whatever. Maybe not so much the guy in Puppet Master 2. That guy from day one always bugged me. You know, the love interest, you know, male main kind of guy of Puppet Master 2. He always annoyed me. But this guy certainly, I think, is kind of got that whatever, just man's man, kind of just, you know, macho, maybe quote unquote handsome appearance or whatever. But there's actually some kind of names in here. There's Louise Fletcher, of course, from probably most well known from One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I was already familiar with that movie, having recorded it off TV in the 80s and watched it a little bit. James Hong, who has been in pretty much everything, is instantly recognizable. He's got a relatively lengthy kind of a more or less. He's got a decent amount of scenes before he ends up dying. He's fun. Sexy ass Sean Weatherly. Before I don't know how much toplessness she's done in her career, but you know, a couple years later in Amityville, 1992, it's about time you'd be able to see her topless in a simulated sex scene. She's pretty sexy in this movie, even if she has clothes on. Demon from Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. The older brother to what the hell's the younger brother's name? Reggie, the older brother of Reggie in Friday the 13th. Part 5 is also featured in this movie. He kind of reminds me of right around the same time, I think it was 2 years before this, they did the War of the Worlds TV show. And there was also, I wanted to say, I don't know if he was wearing a tank top. I get these two guys confused. I don't know. He might have been wearing a tank top too, but in that War of the Worlds TV show from like '88 that went to, I don't know, for a couple of years, there was a guy, a more melanated guy on the computer. It was like the computer whiz in that show too, and I can't remember for the life of me if he was in a tank top, but this guy, you know, the Reggie's older brother from Friday 5 is a more melanated individual. Also the computer whiz who's in a Nike tank top, and this is probably still before Nike was, well, this is kind of Nike was bigger around this time. This probably would have been made in 1989. It came out in 1990 on home video. Nike was a lot bigger than it was like when Nike was featured in, you know, someone's wearing Nike shoes in Reanimator or whatever. But kind of ballsy maybe to wear something Nike this far into the, you know, late 80s, early 90s. But got some Nike representation and Coca-Cola representation in this movie. But that's your handful. I also like the guy who plays Shivers. I think I don't know if he's in any more full moon movies from this era, but I actually really like that character. And I wish he was in it more. There's some kind of, you know, bigger, older woman who's, you know, kind of plays just a character actors or a character situation, just like the cook. And I'm glad she's not in the movie very much, but it seems like I've seen her in things from back in the day as well. And the cast is really kind of fun in this movie, quite honestly. And you've got a couple of sexy ass models. And what was really cool, and it's nice and fair and balanced, because you know, you might be aware that Charles Band is all about, you know, TNA in his movies, and thank you very much, Charles Band, for that. But what's really cool about this movie is it's not just TNA. You've got a couple of the two human subjects that are the subjects of the Project Shadowzone are a couple of naked, you know, humans, one female and one male, and they're both kind of, you know, whatever, just super physical specimens, if you know what I mean. So instead of just having, like, they could have easily had two naked women, you know, but they actually have it be even and fair and balanced. It's a naked hot chick and a, I guess, naked hot quote-unquote guy, if you will, are the two subjects. So you can't just say, you know, Charles Band just had a naked hot chick. There's a naked quote-unquote hot guy, I suppose, as well. So that's kind of funny. And I can just imagine the ad for the casting of these people, just, you know, physical specimens, you know, models needed for this movie to just, you know, lay there in these tubes and do nothing. But I mean, I guess the woman has a line, like at the end. Is her whole line in the lines consist of what happened or something? Well, at first she was, let me out of here. So I guess she's got maybe 2 lines or 3 or something. But the woman does actually speak, where the guy never speaks or never has his eyes open. It makes you wonder how much, like, you know, the guy and the girl that are naked, and, you know, their whole part just consists of laying there naked, how much they got paid. But, you know, one can only assume, you know, they were models or whatever and are used to just sitting around naked or whatever. But kind of interesting. But I will say, you know, that naked chick in the tube, man, she's probably augmented breasts or whatever, but you can kind of tell that the test is when they're laying down. And if they're really pert and, you know, sticking up when they're laying down, they're probably augmented, and most likely augmented, but good augmented, you know. Anyway, this isn't a breast review, it's a movie review. But the whole reason Hickok is there is because there was a fatality, and they're very quickly brought to the fatality situation. And really kind of a cool, gory, I don't know if they would have done this body just for this movie, but it's a really, really kind of a gore. If you're into gore and, you know, whatever, morgue kind of stuff in movies or whatever, this scene, you might like this scene. where the guy, the individual of the test subject that died is all like cut up and cut open, and the brain, the top of his head's gone, and I think the brain's exposed, and it's probably this fake body, or maybe the body is real kind of a thing, and the fake rubber, the head looks rubber or whatever and stuff, but really kind of early on, really kind of a gore. Then they have like just a pile of gore and flesh and just stuff hanging in this pail. It's like on a something to weigh it or whatever, like at the grocery store if you put something in there, melons to weigh. It's like just this pile of guts and just gore in this thing just sitting there in the morgue. And it's just, the scene is kind of funny. Then they got this little monkey who like kind of hits the head and splats Louise Fletcher with blood that'll end up being in a different spot in a later scene because it's probably shot out of order or whatever. But Hickok is there to investigate this guy's death and try to get to the bottom of it. And the whole project, you're probably just wondering what the hell this Project Shadowzone is. Kind of a Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, loosely. It's interesting because this kind of movies were done back around when did Altered States come out? Was that the late 80s? Was it the early 80s? God, it might have been the early 80s. But it's kind of along the lines of Altered States, not quite so, in-depth as that, but simply just, Louise Fletcher at some point in the movie explains it, and it's just like, well, we've discovered a parallel dimension somewhere in sleep, and it kind of, loose logic, incomplete, loose, just B-movie, straight-to-video, full moon logic. Somewhere, if we bring subjects in somewhere here, past normal sleep, or bring them to the EDS 31F and presumably beyond, but we never see anyone taken past EDS 31F. I don't know what F means, like maybe fucked, once you get to 31 fucked, you're fucked or whatever, but once you take them to the sleep pattern of EDS 31F, you're pretty much fucked, and that's what probably happened to the first guy. We don't see that, but we do see what happens to the second guy. He, does the scanners, kind of the vessels kind of thing on his face, and his head blows up. Presumably, maybe his whole body blows up, but we don't see that. But from that point on, the rest of the movie, the whole tube is all just red, which is kind of cool. Reminds me of the film from the mid '80s, Creature, as well. Check out my review for that if you haven't already. But so the premise of this is like when they take them to this EDS 31F, it not only destroys, kills the individual and blows their head up, but it also opens this portal between the dimensions of wherever the hell we are and wherever the hell they are. And then when they do this test, Hickok wants him to bring one of these subjects up to the same place that the guy who formerly died was at when he died. So it's whatever I said, EDS 31F. So there's this kind of, suspenseful scene. Like when I turned to Beth, I made Beth watch this, and she was a real trooper and kind of slogged through it or whatever. But I said when it was over that the scene where he takes this guy, this nude guy in the tube to 31F, and he's just like, after that scene was over, I turned to Beth, you've just watched the most suspenseful scene in cinema history, where it's just kind of like an interesting scene. And this whole movie is like a great, just example of doing your best with little. And I will say that like the movie is kind of written within its means, and it interestingly tackles this kind of grandiose subject with very little to see on screen or whatever. And what I will say about this movie is, arguably, especially by today's standards, it's probably what you'd call a little slow. It's it's pushing 90 minutes, and it's more or less your average movie length, unlike a lot of full moon movies, which can be just barely over an hour, or maybe hour 15 or 10 minutes. Like I'll admit it's like slogs along, but it's got a competence even with its slogginess and longness that I just like the atmosphere, the characters, the actors, the environment, and of course Richard Band, just musical quote unquote accompaniment. A lot of the cues, the Richard band cues in this movie would end up in Crash and Burn the following year. He'd also write some extra music for Crash and Burn, like dun, tss, dun, 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 tss, dun, dun, dun. You know, he'd do some more music for Crash and Burn, but I think a lot of the music from Shadowzone is just repurposed into Crash and Burn. Who knows, maybe the music from Shadowzone was from another Charles Band movie before it, I don't know, but so that's the premise of the movie, and it's interesting how that scene goes. Well, I won't even spoil it. I won't even spoil anymore, but what I do like about the movie, and well, I can spoil this because it's in the trailer, like, it became what Kidwell was looking for. So basically this entity comes through this portal that they open by bringing this butch, you know, naked guy up to 31F EDS or whatever the hell it is. So by doing that, we kill this guy who, you know, the subject, and also, you know, open a portal so this entity, this from this other dimension, this parallel dimension, can come through and, you know, basically terrorize the humans until it realizes that, oh, it's dying in this. I can't. It can't live in you know, the dimension that it traveled into, which is our dimension. So then it wants to bargain with the humans to open a portal and let it go back. And with a kind of a Star Trek the motion picture visual effect, like this vertical sphere. It's just, if you've seen Star Trek the motion picture, it's the alien probe. It's like taken right out of that movie. And, you know, it's interesting how the guy who made The Slayer wrote and directed this, because the entity in its, I guess what we can only assume, natural form at the end of the movie very much resembles The Slayer, which is kind of like, is it The Slayer just like repurposed? Very possibly, but it's interesting. I do like what happens, like with the movie, that, you know, it's like, as a side point, it's like a shape-shifting creature which knows your innermost fears and will become what you fear the most. That little aspect is kind of cool. I don't know how original it is at this time in 1990, but, you know, having not seen every single movie ever made, but that's kind of a cool thing. So this woman who had this problem with rats, a huge, you know, it'll attack her as a huge rat, you know, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a you know, it's a competent B movie, straight to video. Like I say, the thing that really elevates it more than like most people, I don't know, like especially watching the Blu-ray, like the cinematography is really great. And what's cool is, like, I think it's kind of like Crash and Burn, where like the power goes out or something, and they've got like backup lights, you know, in their little underground bunker, wherever the hell they are, and the lighting of like the emergency lighting in the movie is just really atmospheric and moody. A lot of backlighting with, you know, smoke and dust in, you know, so it's got that just really cool, like cinematic, just cinematography. And you know, you're just, of course, you've just got, you know, every now and then we got a scene with the hot naked chick in the tube, so you can just look at this naked woman basically sleeping. She spends the whole movie just laying there asleep. And then, you know, oh, another thing before I end the movie review, that what the hell's his name? James Hong explains. He's like the guy, the main doctor who's in charge of Project Shadowzone. He explains that they electronically sever their brain stems to bring them to this, I guess, you know, this deeper level of sleep than is possible without electronically severing the brain stems. So presumably during this whole movie, the two naked hot, quote-unquote hot guy and the hot chick, their brain stems are electronically severed the whole movie, until Hickok destroys all of the equipment at the end, and that presumably, you know, electronically unsevers the hot busty chick's brainstem, so she wakes up, and maybe Hickok has a date. It's very possible. But my star rating for Shadowzone, it's like, I could probably go as high, I mean, as much as I praise it, I mean, let's face it, it is kind of a slow-moving movie and things, but I think it's competent enough to give it 2.5 stars out of 4 stars. And a lot of you might be wondering, you know, might go and watch it and come back and watch it yourself and go, what the hell? But, you know, being the age I am and stuff, and just being a cool representation of the late 80s, early 90s, early full moon, you know, Richard Band music and some familiar faces, hot naked chick laying there the whole movie, get to see her every now and then, and she actually speaks at the end, and how cool is that? And just you know, I just think it's, you know, for what it is, it's kind of entertaining. Like I say, even before the Blu-ray release, the cinematography I thought was more or less really kind of cool, and you gotta love the you know, Reggie's older brother Demon from Friday 5, him being a more, you know, centered kind of a character, a little more, you know, it's just a bummer because, you know, that guy, I don't know, I don't think I've seen him in a whole hell of a lot of stuff, but every time I see him in something, I'm just like, oh yeah, Demon, you know, like, it's you know, when you're a movie fan, especially if you see movies when you're a kid, if you see someone, it's like Peter Weller. I think the first thing I ever saw him in was RoboCop. So every time I see Peter Weller, I just think of RoboCop. So it's like every time I see that guy, I think of, you know, Friday 5 and Demon and stuff. You know, ooh baby, and how just like memorable his character, although, you know, on the screen for such a short period of time in Friday 5. Just how memorable like that character is and stuff. So it's just fun to see these faces from these movies from my youth. And of course this movie it's ironically it's kind of a movie from my, I mean, it's a movie that came out during my youth, but I wouldn't even see it until I was in my mid 20s. I don't think I saw it for the first time. I knew of it, and then it'd take like 12 years or something for me to see it, which is interesting. But yeah, I was going to just briefly show the VHS. I looked for it. I can't find the VHS, but it's got to be somewhere. I mean, I wouldn't have sold it, but that's my review of the movie. Now on to my review of the recently released Blu-ray, which, as I said, it's got that Shadowzone remastered, which, you know, it doesn't really matter one way or another, but I don't know. This is more or less the original artwork. They probably tweaked it a little bit. They usually change the font. I don't think it's like the original font, but I'm not going to complain too much. It's all about the quality of the video and audio quality of the movie on the disc at the end of the day. Speaking of that, I've already kind of spoiled that, but I'm very, 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 very delighted to report that the video quality on this Blu-ray release is absolutely stunning. I think maybe a little bit towards the end of the movie there's some, you know, the actual film elements show wear and tear, but I don't have a problem with that. It's really not that big a deal, but just marks and specks and this kind of stuff on the screen. But as I've said in my Blu-ray reviews from, you know, over the years, I actually kind of like that stuff because it just kind of reminds you of that grindhouse experience and just reminds you that it's actually frickin' authored and presented and, you know, first originally recorded and existed on film. So I don't mind that kind of stuff. But all around, just a very, very stellar, you know, visual video presentation. The audio of, you know, obviously like so many of these full moon Blu-rays is like the 2-channel stereo and, you know, also the 5.1. I never bother with, well, I did with Robot Wars Blu-ray back in the day, but I think all of their 5.1s, or at least of their old movies, is just basically consists of, you know, Dolby surround that's just upmixed or whatever to 5.1, so you're not getting like some kind of a new expensive tedious remastering or anything like that. You're just most likely getting a Dolby surround upmix into 5.1. Some of the complaints or problems with former full moon Blu-ray releases consisted of, you know, formerly stereo audio tracks being mono or whatever. I can't tell really one way or another, but I think, you know, it sounds like this is very well possibly stereo like it's supposed to be. Don't quote me 100% on that, but it's possible that this is actually, unlike some of their, you know, earlier Blu-ray releases, that, you know, all their full moon movies were stereo, you know, ultra stereo back in the day. So a lot of the early full moon Blu-ray releases unfortunately were like mono, maybe the left or the right or combined, but mono. If I had to take a guess, it's hard to tell, but I'd say that this is, you know, ultra stereo, actual stereo, but that doesn't matter too much, as the sound doesn't matter on these full moon movies as much to me as just having a stellar visual presentation, which I'm glad to say this has. Special features are very sparse. We've got original trailer, full moon trailers, so obviously you get, what's really cool about this though is they like use the new HD scan to recut the trailer, which is actually really kind of cool. So they got the trailer using the new HD scan, then you've got other full moon trailers on here as well. All I can say is thank you very much, Charles Band and Full Moon, for putting one of these early full moon, you know, freaking classics on Blu-ray. And for a while there I was like, God, because, you know, I was like, you know, did they lose the film elements to their early full moon movies? Can Crash and Burn ever come out? And when this came out, it gave me hope for possible Crash and Burn. And I know back in the day of like they did, like Charles Band was doing commentaries. I don't know why he's not doing those anymore. But like if you haven't seen like the Trancers 2 commentary, that is so awesome because it's freaking Charles Band, Tim Thomerson, and Megan Ward. What an awesome commentary, and my dream commentary for a Crash and Burn Blu-ray. And I've even emailed Charles Band this, never got a response. I think I emailed him this twice. I'm like, I hope that Crash and Burn Blu-ray is in the works for the future, and it would be really cool if you could get, you know, yourself, Charles Band directed Crash and Burn, and Bill Moseley and Megan Ward for a commentary. How frickin' awesome would that be? Unfortunately, it probably won't happen if there's a Blu-ray, but in a perfect world, that would just be so cool. But like I say, the commentary for Trancers 2 is really amazing. So at least they did that. But fingers crossed for a Crash and Burn Blu-ray in the future. I do have the Blu-ray of Seed People. It's ordered and it's on its way, so I would expect a Seed People movie review and Blu-ray review coming sooner than later. That is a movie that I saw not long after it came out on home video somewhere, and I think it was early 1992. I actually have got the Seed People original VHS as well, so expect a review of Seed People and the recently released Blu-ray of that. I'm contemplating, of course, Ginger Dead Man did get a Blu-ray release recently. I'm contemplating, I'm not as big a fan as Ginger Dead Man as I am of Shadowzone and Seed People, but I'm curious about the quality of the Ginger Dead Man Blu-ray, so I'll probably end up with that. If I do, I'll be reviewing that as well. So before I end the review, I will show you what the Blu-ray disc itself looks like. It looks like that. As I said, expect a movie/Blu-ray review of Seed People and possibly Ginger Dead Man. That movie, I tell you, Ginger, it's a bummer that you know, the downward trajectory that Charles Band movies and Full Moon movies made over the decades, you know, from early Full Moon till like 15 years later and Ginger Dead Man and all this kind of stuff. But you know, I don't know, I was gonna say give him credit for continuing to put out stuff, but if the stuff ain't, anyway, I know a lot of people enjoy the stuff, so you know, I'd rather have it exist so they can enjoy it rather than not exist so they can enjoy it. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video.
Assume the physical nature of human thought.